So, Kenny, should we have ship officer rankings?
No, Neal, that's actually not a bad idea. I might need a bit more information to understand precisely what exactly you mean by that, but I'm intrigued.
Like science officer Kenny, security officer, archaeological assistant.
Ooh, that's a fancy one.
Ship computer, should one of us just be called Mother, for instance?
Now that's a title right there, if I've ever heard one.
What are some of the other rankings?
Well, I mean, there's Captain? I think you forgot Captain on that list.
Well, Captain's a big one. But part of me is trying to avoid anything kind of military sounding. I don't want to get accused of stolen valor when I'm like, Lieutenant First Class Neal, but not really.
Fair enough. Well, let's see. There's the classic ship's cook. There's the pilot. Mm-hmm. Let's see.
There's a whole Xenopedia article on alien ranks. Oh, I think it's just for the Predators.
Well.
Leader.
It was worth a try, at least.
Scion, Elite, Warrior, Soldier, Guard, High Praetor. I've never even heard that. Did they just misspell Predator? Is that why I thought this was about Predators?
Well, there is a type of Xenomorph in one of the spin-off things. I don't remember which one. I don't think it's from one of the movies, but it might be, and I'm forgetting. But they're I think they're actually called Praetorians or something like that.
Okay.
And I believe they're modified or upgraded versions of either warriors or drones, and it's their job to protect a hive queen or something like that.
That feels like some comics nonsense to me.
Yeah, probably. It probably is. I mean, the comics have a whole lot of nonsense. I'll tell you that much right now.
Alien Dallas Ring. We're gonna have to watch them. We may, you know what? Maybe we'll get different ranks for each episode. I'm gonna call security officer.
Security officer.
Yeah.
All right.
You can be science officer because those are the only two I can think of.
Officer. I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, I couldn't think of one funny enough that quickly, so I'm fine with science officer.
Do you want to be a geologist? How about that?
I could be a geologist. There's I was going to say there's 4 of them, but actually there's 4 archaeologists or something like that. I think there's only the one geologist as far as I know.
So you're a head geologist, Kenny, and I'll be security grunt, Neal.
Security grunt. Now there's a classic title you love to see.
There it is. Welcome, everyone, to Crew Expendable, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything in the Alien media franchise, specifically the one with the Xenomorph in it.
Yeah, the double mouth guy, big, huge head, no eyes, long tail.
Very phallic creature.
That's not only one way to put it, but an accurate way to put it, yeah.
Sure, H.R. Giger was a freak, right?
He certainly was.
What are we talking about today, head geologist Kenny?
Well, today, according to my notes, it says here we're going to be talking about the 2012 movie Prometheus.
Yeah, we are.
I was hoping there was going to be an air horn there or something. That's why I paused for a moment. There we go.
I feel like that's not appropriate for this show. It needs to be terrifying klaxons or something.
Well, I mean, we didn't think that far ahead when it comes to the soundboard. Yeah. We'll probably get something like that sooner or later.
I'll get a soundboard loaded eventually. A lot of this is probably going to have to happen in post-production for now.
It's fine.
Yeah, we'll work it out. These things are constantly changing and evolving, much like the Xenomorph. Am I right?
You are certainly right. Got him. That's a slam dunk right there.
Yeah, so we're talking about 2012's Prometheus, the kind of prequel to Alien.
Sorta.
right? Depending on
It,
where you read things, it either is or isn't, but it certainly takes
when
place beforehand.
It certainly does. I actually got it right here. It specifically, the bulk of the movie takes place right around Christmas in the year 2093 specifically.
Yes, it
But
does.
I can say, however, with regards to the pseudo prequel status, I don't remember exactly what interview it was, but I remember coming across something where Ridley Scott said it may have even been before the movie came out. But he said that his intention was not to make necessarily a prequel to Alien specifically, but it was more he wanted to make another movie that also took place in the Alien universe that had, I believe his word was, strands of like the what we would call the vibe of Alien, while not necessarily setting out to make specifically an Alien prequel movie.
Okay. Well, I think he was mostly successful in that. I don't know
It
that it's
certainly isn't. I don't want to say it's not super connected to Alien, but I would not necessarily call this movie a prequel to Alien. So yeah, he's right in that regard.
I don't know that's the movie that I would have wanted, but it's the movie that we got. Not to
Yeah, I mean,
not to tip my hand too early here.
yeah, it's definitely not what I necessarily would have made given the circumstances, but then again, I'm also not the guy that directed the original one, so what do I know?
Sure. But Ridley Scott also not the guy who wrote the original one, so I don't know why he gets to make all the decisions about the franchise.
You got me there.
Yeah, I was listening to something else, another podcast talking about this very movie, and they raised a really good point. Once you bring back a director into a franchise like this, where you've had a different director for each one, once you bring somebody back, it sort of solidifies the tone for the series from that point on, right? Like it sort of canonizes those aspects, whatever aspects that director chooses to repeat in the movies he's making in the series. It sort of makes the entire series. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing for this franchise. We're going to have to dig into that a little bit more. Probably mostly on the next episode or the next movie episode once we've talked about Alien Covenant. But
Considering it was also made by Ridley Scott, your idea of like, are those parts of the tone set in stone after a director comes back? Well, since he also made the next one, it'll be the perfect like control group to find out how true that is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you see Prometheus for the first time? It was fairly recently for you?
I saw Prometheus. It was I even meant to look this up specifically. I don't have like the exact date written down or something, but I ordered the box set of the 4 main movies and also Covenant and Prometheus. I ordered them on Amazon, which means, back like a few years ago, which means it'll have the specific date that I placed the order in my order history. And I did forget to look it up. I meant to, thought about it, and forgot about it. But I do know, as I mentioned in the previous episode, that I didn't watch any of them until after Covenant had already come out.
Right.
So it would have been late 2017 or 2018 at the earliest. So last time when I first saw Prometheus, couldn't have been any earlier than 2018. Okay. And up until just a couple of days ago, that first time that I watched it is the only time I had seen it until just last night I watched it.
Oh boy. I saw this movie in theaters. I was so fucking hyped for Prometheus. As soon as like the teaser trailers and everything were out, I was just completely absorbed. I was reading articles, anything I could find. I was like just watching the trailer over and over, trying to like spotting iconography that reminded me of the original Alien, like from the spacesuits, which are different. But of course, the shots of the what we called at that time the space jockey, the engineer, just the whole thing. Like I was so in on this movie. I think I saw it opening night. I certainly saw it opening weekend, and I remember really like, I don't know if it was just recency bias or something, but I was like super into it after my first viewing. spent a lot of time theorizing about what it meant for the franchise, how the stuff in this movie sort of, could flow into Alien, because as much as Ridley Scott is saying, it's set in the same universe, but it's not really a prequel. They do a lot of stuff that makes you think it's more connected than just like threads, right?
Especially in retrospect, yes.
Yes, and especially after Alien Covenant came out.
Yeah, exactly.
Subsequent watches, I've watched it a handful of times since 2012. I less than 10, I'd say, but several times.
All right.
And yeah, it kind of just, the gloss wore off like the more distance I had from that first viewing.
Speaking of, just as a very brief side note, speaking of your first viewing, it says, right, you said you saw opening weekend, right?
Pretty sure.
Well, it says here, according to Wikipedia, the movie was released in the United States on June 8th, 2012, which means as of this recording, in just a couple of weeks, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of the release of Prometheus.
Holy smokes, that's depressing.
Yeah.
That's a little depressing, I'm not going to lie. 10 years.
Yeah, it's just extremely close to 10 years since the movie came out, again, as of when we're recording.
Man.
I love that sound effect so much. It never is not funny to.
Good.
But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to interject that real quick because we were talking about seeing it opening weekend.
Okay, good to know. I'm fucking old. Do you want to dive into this movie? Maybe let's run through a little bit of plot synopsis and then talk a little bit more in detail about, the stuff we liked, didn't like, etc.
Etc. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, that is why we're here, after all.
I mean, we're not here to fuck spiders, are we?
Shout out to Dominic, who might listen to this.
What up, Dominic?
In 2093, a team of future space scientists board an extremely zazzy ship to lead an expedition to a planetoid designated LV-223, where they believe they may discover the origins of humanity. Upon landing, they find a pile of dead humanoid aliens, a dangerous mutagenic pathogen, and at one point, a head explodes. Look, if you're listening to this, you've seen the movie. We're not going to go beat by beat. This is just a general.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like we should probably assume somebody listening to this has seen the movie. Yeah. And here's the thing. If they haven't, then it's safe to, like, why would we assume they wouldn't think there'd be spoilers? Of course there's going to be spoilers. We're talking about the damn movie, In fact, just assume that there's going to be spoilers not only for this movie, but for every other movie in the series, in every single episode, because it's kind of impossible to talk about Prometheus without constantly comparing it to Alien. It just sort of has to be done. I don't know how to talk about it on its own. It's weird because it's like the plot of the movie is kind of, if they decided they were going to use the plot of Alien, but make it a little bit worse at every single step, just so they could like mask the fact that it's basically the same thing as Alien.
Yeah. It might have been a little bit of a misstep, maybe, to start with Prometheus. But, Ridley Scott and fucking Damon Lindelof set out to make a prequel, a story set in the Alien universe that ties into it, that happens before it, and do a whole bunch of stuff that's going to affect the lore. So they made this a starting point for the franchise, whether I think it should be or not. So I think that starting here is, we can justify it.
I mean, the thing of it is even if narratively speaking, it's not necessarily intended by the creators or the engineers, if you will. But it's not.
That's the wrong button. That happens at every time.
But whether they necessarily intended this to be like the beginning of like the story that Alien tells, it's still, as far as I know, currently the chronologically earliest part of the Alien franchise to have been made and like released.
Yep.
So even if it's not supposed to be like in the literal sense, a prequel to Alien, it is still the prequel to Alien as a franchise because
Yeah.
it's still the earliest thing in the franchise that exists.
And I know what you're saying out there. Someone's going to be in the comments saying, well, actually, Alien versus Predator took place in like 2004, but that doesn't count. We're not counting those as canon to the. There's six canon movies to the Alien franchise. The AVP stuff's in its own little corner, and we're going to talk about it later. Interestingly, this movie and the first Alien versus Predator movie sure do have a lot in common. Boy, they really, really, really do.
This is where I'll confess that I don't even remember. I may have even said this on the previous episode, but I haven't actually seen either of the AVP movies. So I'm intrigued enough that I think you'll need to go into at least a hair bit more detail.
Okay. I'll go into a little bit more detail. So the basic plot of Alien versus Predator is some archaeologists find some evidence of an ancient civilization, go on an expedition to find out what it's all about. That's funded by the Wayland Corporation. Encounter alien creatures that used to hold dominion over humanity. In this case, it's the Predators, and sort of get in some fights with some xenomorphs and shit. Like it is a more alien version of this movie, honestly, but the setup is essentially exactly the same. It's an exploratory mission to find secrets that predate recorded human history. That's it.
I was going to make a joke where after you were done with that, I was going to go, all right, yes, I've also seen Prometheus. Now tell me what AVP1 is about. But I decided not to.
Sure, but we're not here to talk about AVP. We're here to talk about Prometheus. And I think I've been kind of hard on this movie so far in our discussion, basically describing it as worse than Alien, which, to be fair, a lot of movies are.
It is worse than the first Alien. That is correct.
I do want to talk about some good things. First of all, the cast is really, really fucking good. I don't know that the characters are all good, but the cast is really good.
Bro, this cast is stacked as hell.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to once again pull up the notes I was taking when I was, making the movie or watching the movie last night. I wasn't making the movie. Trust me, if I was, it would have been different.
Oh, you're the one. You're the one to blame.
Like, it's got everyone cool in it. They all rule in some various way or another.
Sure, yeah. Noomi Rapace as Elizabeth Shaw. I mostly know her from the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movies.
I have seen those, but the thing I primarily know her from, well, other than this,
sure.
The other thing I primarily know her from is the second Sherlock Holmes movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I've seen that once.
Which I was actually reading something last night that said that movie, which came out a year before Prometheus, that movie was literally her first English language film role.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she's a very strong protagonist in this movie. She is probably, outside of Michael Fassbender as the android David, she's my favorite part of the movie.
I'll probably agree with that. Yeah. I mean, going through the rest of the cast list, there's some people on here that I like, but her and Michael Fassbender are probably like the two that made the biggest impression, yes. Which I suppose makes sense considering they're the two main characters of the movie. But,
oh, for sure. Yeah. And she had big shoes to fill, right? Coming into the franchise as a lead after Sigourney Weaver, who had previous to this been the lead in the 4 Alien films. Like, the comparisons were bound to happen. I like that she's not just a proto Ripley, she's her own character with her own motivations.
She is also, I believe Shaw is the first canonically, considering we're not counting the AVP movies, this is the first Alien movie that doesn't have Ripley in it. So
yeah. Who else we had? Charlize Theron as Meredith Vickers, sort of the Wayland director of this mission, right? She's there to, like, for the purposes of the company.
And she's fine, whatever,
It's a stock archetypal character. I mean, she's good. She's always good. She's a fantastic actor. she did the best with what she had to work with.
Yeah, I mean, they gave her this role, and she's like, just kind of stalking around, watching people. She's always like cold and icy and glaring at people all the time. And it's like, she's good enough of an actress that she could do this shit in her fucking sleep.
Yeah. Yes. She did not break a sweat on set, except maybe in some of those bodysuits they put her in.
Also, just as a brief side note here, it says here, a couple of the other actresses that were considered for the role of Meredith Vickers that eventually went to Charlize Theron is Michelle Yeoh and Angelina Jolie.
Interesting. I was going to guess you were going to say Angelina Jolie. I might have heard that before. I'm glad they went with Charlize Theron. Michelle Yeoh, though, interesting connection there. I'm going to scroll down this cast list to talk a little bit about Benedict Wong, who plays Ravel, because Benedict Wong was in a movie with Michelle Yeoh called Sunshine, directed by Danny Boyle, which Prometheus, the whole time I was sitting through Prometheus when I first watched it, I was getting Sunshine flashbacks, because Sunshine is a fantastic science fiction movie about a mission to space, in this case to reignite the sun that is
interesting.
That is burning out. It's a fantastic movie. It's like writer Alex Garland, I think he was definitely inspired by the original Alien and like Dan O'Bannon in general. And Michelle Yeoh was in that, so that honestly would have been pretty cool to have her be the leader of this mission and reuniting with Benedict Wong from Sunshine.
Which I'll admit, speaking very briefly of Benedict Wong, I have in my notes, and I quote, this is literally what it says: "Hey, Benedict Wong!" ! Cool to see him in other stuff. Because I'll admit, I didn't recognize him right away, but when I did, I recognized him because I saw him in the MC. So
sure, yeah. I have not seen Doctor Strange. I guess I did see he was in Endgame or Infinity War, one of those, right?
One of them. I don't remember which one.
So I did not make the connection because I'm not particularly tuned into the MCU. Sorry, everybody.
It's fine. They'll deal.
I'm too busy with the Alien and Mortal Kombat universes. I don't have room for all these universes, man.
But like, just as a brief aside, my point in bringing that up is like, it was cool to see him again because like I'm really only used to seeing him like in what he looks like in the MCU, where he's a little older, he's gained a little bit of weight, he looks a lot different. Like, he was in this movie, here and there at various different points.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like 2/3 of the way through the movie until I even recognized him, because I was like, wow, he really does look a lot different. He's a lot thinner. His face looks a lot different because he's a little younger than I'm used to seeing him. He has way different, well, not way different, but different hair. Like, it took me a little while to recognize it was him. And I was like, oh, Benedict Wong. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's great as, like, who is it? His character Ravel and Chance, played by Eamon Elliott. They're sort of the co-pilots, would you say, to Idris Elba's Captain Janik?
I would say that, yes. I believe, I don't remember, I'll admit, the other co-pilot, you said Eamon Elliott played Chance.
Yeah.
I don't recall off the top of my head that character's name ever actually being said out loud on screen anywhere. I only knew his name was Chance because I was watching the movie on Amazon Prime last night. And whenever you pause it, Prime shows like every actor in the current scene that's playing and what their character name is.
Yes.
That is how I knew that character's name was Chance.
Right. They don't get a lot of screen time. They don't really have much to do. Idris Elba, fantastic as Captain Janik. He got some good moments in the movie. I don't think there was enough of him either.
Oh, there certainly wasn't. I loved him. He was great.
He felt weirdly like the most natural of the whole cast. Like he's just there to do his fucking job,
He's just a dude,
Right. Yeah. I mean, first of all, he's great in everything.
Yeah. He's Idris Elba.
Yeah. Stringer Bell. Come on. Everybody out there should watch The Wire. I'm going to say that every episode. He's probably, Noomi Rapace, Michael Fassbender, like they had the most to do in the movie. I think that their performances were very strong. Idris Elba's like third for me.
Yeah, agreed. I would agree to that. he kind of has. I mean, I know this might sound weird out of context, but like in this movie, I thought Idris Elba kind of had what I refer to internally as the Tommy Lee Jones effect. One time, you said earlier that you're not an MCU guy, so you might not know this, but Tommy Lee Jones is in the first Captain America movie.
Oh, yeah. I did know that.
And he plays like, you know, just like the sergeant on the base or whatever.
Right.
And like they were asking him about like being in the MCU, and like his response in the interview was, to sum it up, something to the effect of, I've played a million of these characters. I can do it with my eyes closed. And like,
yeah,
Idris Elba was kind of the same thing here. It's like, I'm not saying this is exactly the same character as all the ones he always plays, but it's like he generally gets this type of stuff. Like, you know, like for instance, Pacific Rim, he played basically the same character. You know,
dude, hey, wait a second. He's the one who crashes the ship, the Prometheus, into the engineer ship. So technically, in this movie, he kind of canceled the apocalypse.
Oh, God damn it.
Come on. That's good. That's a good pull.
I mean, yes, you're right. It is. I got pissed off because I didn't think about it myself.
I'm going to pat myself on the back for that one. I also love that his introduction, he's just like, everyone just woke up from cryo sleep and he's immediately smoking a cigar and setting up a Christmas tree.
Yeah, like you know how I mentioned earlier that this is like, when I watched it last night, this is only the second time I'd seen it. Well, this is only the first time I'd seen it since the first time I saw it.
Right.
And so like most of this movie, I would say, like, no joke, 80% plus of this movie, I did not remember from the first time I watched it. And so like how you mentioned that scene where he's like setting up the Christmas tree, smoking a little cigar, you know, and like Vickers comes up to him and she's like, what the hell are you doing? And I thought she was going to get on his case because he was smoking in the ship.
Right.
And then he's like, I'm setting up the Christmas tree. And I was like, oh, that's what she's going off on him about. All right.
I mean, it's not his ship, but like it's his ship, right? I don't think she really gets to tell him what to do, as he makes very clear towards the end of the movie.
That is very correct.
And then in the weirdest role of all, we've got Guy Pearce as old man Peter Wayland. Guy Pearce, decidedly not an old man.
He is extremely not an old man. Let's see. He is, as of this recording, he is 54 years old. So which means he was like 43 when they filmed this movie.
Yeah. And looks younger than me.
He certainly does.
And he is.
Okay,
he is 18 years older than me, if I did that math right.
The second note I have when I was writing my notes in this movie is, and I quote, Guy Pearce, old man makeup bad.
It's really bad. And it was such a weird decision to cast him in the role. Like, I know there's promotional stuff, short films involving Peter Wayland that came out as marketing for this. And then, of course, Peter Wayland from the past does show up in Covenant, spoiler alert. But he didn't look like Guy Pearce as an old man, and he didn't speak like Guy Pearce as an old man. So why didn't they just cast somebody else to be old Peter Wayland?
Well,
and cast Guy Pearce as young Peter Wayland.
Here's an interesting little note. There actually is a reason for that, and the reason is because an earlier draft of the movie, Wayland was supposed to be younger and older. Like, he appeared in like two different ages over the course of the movie. Okay. And so they hired a young actor so that way, or younger actor, so that way they could get one person to play both versions rather than hiring two different actors. But just as a brief little side note, going back to my notes about 2/3 of the way down, I have a note that says, Guy Pearce, old man makeup still bad, comma, would have preferred Max von Sydow like they had originally planned on hiring for the role.
That's a much better, it feels like that's not where you save your money on a movie like this. Because this movie had like a gigantic budget. It
certainly did. It had a budget of, I got it right here. The budget is estimated between $120 and $130 million.
Holy smokes. That's a lot of money.
That's a shitload of money, dog.
Yeah. Also, I just want to drop this in just the weirdest thing. Patrick Wilson as Shaw's father in that dream that she's having. Just,
Dude.
I like that guy. It was just weird. Like, I don't really consider Patrick Wilson to be like a character actor, right? Like,
I also don't. I was blown away.
like was he
when
just like
that scene started, and I was like, "Is that fucking Patrick Wilson?"
Yeah, was he just like hanging out on set or something?
Yeah,
They're like, why don't you get in there,
know.
man? Little trivia about Patrick Wilson: he was raised in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where I live.
That's fancy. Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah, his dad was a local news anchor here.
Oh, nice.
Might still be. I don't know. I don't watch the news. Come on.
Yeah, who does?
Can't trust them.
I know I don't. Mainstream media and such.
They're all in the pocket of big Wayland.
That's right.
Yeah,
by the way, just for any listeners out there, that was a parody. I wasn't being serious with it.
That's
don't
fine.
clip that.
Yeah, the cast has a lot going for it. I don't think the writing has a lot going for it. John Spates wrote the initial script, I think, if I'm getting this right, and Damon Lindelof came in for rewrites and to sort of punch it up. I don't think it was a full co-write, you know?
They are credited. They're both credited, but I don't think they're credited together. Because if I recall, I believe the way screenwriting credits like rules works is that if the two names have the word "and" between them, they both contributed simultaneously together. And if there is an ampersand between the names, they like those two people worked on it separately and one of them rewrote the other one. I think that's how it works.
Interesting.
I mean, don't quote me on that because I don't work in show business.
Sure.
So that might be wrong, but I think that's how it works.
What are you, the mainstream media? Come on. Can't trust you either.
Yeah, dude, can't trust anything I say. Who knows?
Yeah. I was just kind of like, yeah.
Hey, shrug. You know, what else are you going to say?
Yeah, I think a lot of the failings in this movie are probably in the script, and I'm one of those people who is going to accuse Damon Lindelof for a lot of that.
I mean, that's fair.
Because as good as
he probably deserves it.
As good as this cast is, the characters for the most part are just like generic archetypes, right? You've got like Charlie Holloway, right? Shaw's boyfriend or husband or whatever, and partner, like research partner and archaeologist partner, and he's just the biggest piece of shit when they get to the engineer structure and don't find any alive, even though the thing they found that that sent them on this path was 35,000 years old. And then you've got Sean Harris's Fifield, the character who literally says, "I'm not here to make friends." And then just like instantly becomes a coward once like the dead bodies of the engineers show up and like has a freak out. Like everyone is incredibly one note, and I just don't really believe any of them are human beings.
I will say though, as a very brief aside, you mentioned Holloway. Yeah. Holloway, you know, as you may recall, is played by Logan Marshall Green. Have you ever seen anything else he's been in?
He looks familiar. I don't think I can point to anything directly. He's kind of got a show.
He was on a show called Dark Blue, which I've heard of, but I've never watched. It was like a cop drama show.
Oh boy!
But I know him again, like with Noomi Rapace. I primarily know him from this movie. But the other thing I know him from is a movie from, I think it was like 2017 or 2018, I think, called Upgrade. Have you ever seen Upgrade?
No, I've heard of it.
Upgrade is the movie that Lee Winnell made before he directed the Invisible Man remake with Elizabeth Moss in it.
Okay.
And it's like sort of an action movie. It has a little bit of elements of a horror movie. It's about a dude played by Logan Marshall Green, who gets mugged one night and gets like paralyzed from the waist down, or like maybe the back. I don't remember exactly where the injury happens, but he gets paralyzed.
Okay.
And they implant like a microchip like, a little, like, basically like a second brain like dinosaurs have,
Sure.
to implant like a little microchip like in him to be able to, like, technologically give him the ability to control his like limbs and move and stuff again.
Okay.
Like the AI or the chip has like an AI or something in it, and like the AI becomes intelligent and like learns that it can control his body without him like needing to allow it to. So this AI starts like taking control of his body like a puppet.
Oh man.
And it's extremely tense and very good, and I really like that.
Okay.
And that and Prometheus, that's like the two things that I know this guy from. So like with the first time I had watched Prometheus, I hadn't seen Upgrade yet. So when I watched Upgrade, I was like, oh, that's the guy from Prometheus. And then when I watched Prometheus last night, I was like, oh yeah, that's the guy from Upgrade.
Also, I'm sure to somebody out there who's listening, he is most well known as Trey Atwood from 9 episodes of The OC.
Which I have never seen.
No,
so.
but I feel like I should watch it. It feels kind of weirdly up my alley, honestly.
It seems like, I was literally going to say, it seems like the kind of show you.
Yeah, it's definitely the kind of show I would watch. That, and like I should check out One Tree Hill also.
Also seems like your kind of thing, yeah.
But not Riverdale. I tried Riverdale. Riverdale sucks.
I don't watch Riverdale. I do watch Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, however.
What? That's because that's a good show.
It certainly is.
Yeah,
but
man.
Anyway.
The characterization and the writing, the characterization, the character. There we go. That's just what I'm trying to say. The characters kind of drag the movie down for me.
They're all an archetype,
David feels like the only. David's an archetype too, right? I mean, he's a synthetic, right? He's an android. Classic alien shenanigans to have the android, the synthetic, be kind of mischievous, right? Like he's definitely pulling strings behind the scenes here. He's on this mission because Peter Wayland is secretly on this ship because he wants to meet his maker before he dies.
Spoiler alert.
The crew has nobody but David and Vickers know, right? And I guess his direct medical crew, who are also, I guess, just hiding, right? Like,
until Shaw finds out near the end of the movie.
Right. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So David's like, yeah, he's pulling the strings. He's, stealing the pathogen. He's the one who spreads it to Charlie, who causes like Charlie to get infected and then Shaw to get infected and impregnated with something alien that's not an alien as we know them. He's, we don't know what he's saying to that engineer when he faces him at the end. Like David's got his mission, right? And it was interesting, and it felt like Alien. Like that's part of the movie that felt like Alien to me was the David stuff. Nobody else felt like Alien to me, right?
There is certainly a historical precedent in the franchise for the synthetics to be, if not necessarily evil.
Yeah.
I guess rightfully suspicious, I guess would be a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it, but like there's good solid precedent going back to 1979 for the synthetics to be up to no good, so to speak. This movie follows bravely in that tradition.
Yeah, they play with it. I mean, they change it up in Aliens, obviously, with Bishop, but they still play a little bit with the idea that Ripley doesn't trust him. And then Call in Alien Resurrection, she seems to be advanced to like past the level of even David, who seems to be more advanced than the other androids we see in terms of like thinking for himself, even though he's constantly acknowledging that while he understands emotion, he cannot feel it.
He certainly does do that.
I think he says that several times.
He says that more than once for sure. I know that.
Yeah, and the other thing that feels alien about it is that they followed the android naming schedule that they set up, right? First one we see Ash in Alien, Ash starts with an A. Second one we see in Aliens, Bishop starts with a B. Third one we see Call in Alien Resurrection starts with a C. Then this movie we get David starts with a D, A, B, C, D. Pretty slick little thing they're doing there.
And then for the next one, they go with the next letter, W, when Walter gets introduced.
A, B, C, D, W. I wonder if you track every android that appeared like in the comics or books, just like release every named synthetic, if you naturally get to W by the time Covenant would have happened.
You know, that would be an extremely funny thing to keep track of, but I cannot see either of us remembering to do that each episode.
I might just take a note every time we come across one, just see how that works out. I'm willing to bet it doesn't work out at all.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Also, since we're talking about David, going back to briefly to a part of the conversation we were having earlier, it says here that Michael Fassbender did not base his portrayal of David after the androids in any of the previous Alien movies. Mm-hmm. He instead based it off of the replicants from Blade Runner.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. He crushed it, dude. He's my favorite part of this movie. He absolutely is.
He's widely considered the best part of both Prometheus and Covenant.
Sure, yeah. And in Covenant, we get to see him kiss himself.
Both of the movies have gotten a mixed reception, but he has gotten near unanimous praise. Yeah. And one thing I did also find interesting is because I believe you're consulting the page for the movie on Xenopedia, if I recall.
I do have that around.
I, however, am using just the Wikipedia page for it.
Okay, I bet it's the exact same article.
And they probably are. But the reason I bring this up is because on Wikipedia, you know, since it's not a wiki site for specifically Alien, it doesn't have a separate page for every single thing like Xenopedia does.
Right.
The Wikipedia, like, Alien section on the site, has ones for all the movies, ones for the games, things like that. But there's only a handful of characters that have their own separate, distinct Wikipedia page. Yep. Those characters are, of course, Ripley, as you may imagine, Hicks from 2,
fair.
The Xenomorph as a species, and David. David is important enough and big deal of enough that he has his own separate Wikipedia page, separate from either of the movies.
He deserves it. But so what's tough for me is that as much as I love Fassbender playing that character and how interesting I find that character, this movie started, I think because he was so good and so fascinating, they decided to make him the center of Covenant also. And I think that is kind of a misstep, honestly.
Again, not the choice I would have made. Yeah. But
I'm going to just get this criticism of this movie out of the way first. I definitely blame the Lindelof of it all. He famously wrote on Lost, right?
Certainly did.
And famously wrote, I think, 2 issues of a proposed 3 or 4 issue Ultimate Hulk versus Wolverine comic that never got finished because my personal theory is he didn't know what to do with it.
Probably not. He generally seems to have that problem a lot. I'll put it that way.
He's got a lot of, he comes up with cool ideas that I don't think have a lot behind them. And I don't think he cares that they don't have a lot behind them. And I'm not saying that I need a movie to give me answers to every single question, because I don't. In fact, I think that this movie gave me answers to questions that I didn't want to know the answers to.
And maybe didn't even have in the first place.
But I think that this movie didn't really know what it was. I think this movie proposes a lot of things that they can't really back up. It's fine if you don't want to give the audience all of the answers, but the answers still have to be there. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like this weird mishmash of familiar stuff with a twist, right? There's cool looking alien stuff in this. I think I mentioned earlier, the spacesuits, they looked very reminiscent of the spacesuits on the Nostromo. Mm-hmm. We get the space jockey, right? Turns out space jockey, the big alien from Alien in the derelict ship, actually was wearing a spacesuit, and they're just big Vitruvian men underneath, right? That's fine. It was cool to see the space jockey. I don't know how crazy I am about the reveal that it isn't this cool looking. I think was it Damien who said like elephant monster, right?
Yes, I believe that was his phrase, elephant monster. Yes.
Yeah, and then like even that sort of backtracked on stuff that had been kind of adapted from like the space jockey as a creature as seen in Alien shows up as a creature that looks like that and is not wearing a suit in at least in the Alien versus Predator 2 PC game, and I think in several of the early Dark Horse comics, and was probably described or explored in some of the novels that I haven't read. So I was kind of used to it being one creature, and then they're like, nope, psych, it's this whole other creature. And then we got to talk about the black goo of it all also, right? Because it's in this ship that is inside this structure, and they don't know it's a ship yet, and it's all laid out in these jars and vases like the xenomorph egg, and sitting in front of a mural that looks very similar to the xenomorph and this weird black green glowing rock that I have no idea what is on a dais in front of all the jars. That's never addressed. It's just kind of shown. And I think Holloway looks at it and that's all we see. And so it's like, okay, there's some connection between this pathogen and the xenomorph. They're making that very clear. And this is the same alien race that was transporting the eggs. And the vases are laid out just like the eggs were in Alien. And we're on LV-223, which is the moon next to LV-426. But none of it really ties in or connects.
Yeah, none of it really ultimately actually means anything.
No.
Because this is all just like a bunch of stuff that also happens, and it happens before the first Alien movie. And then it's just like, okay, but like it happened, then what? Like none of it ever, like you said, none of it ever really goes anywhere.
No, it's just like, hey, this is kind of Alien. Right? This is kind of what you wanted. This is like, it was almost like a bait and switch, right? Like this is a silly thing to maybe get hung up on because they wanted to tell a different story, right? They wanted to tell a story separate from the Alien universe, but they used so much iconography from the Alien universe that you can't help but connect it. Like if this had been a completely different, like if the xenomorph and pathogens and all of that stuff had never shown up, the mutating aspect of this ooze, if this had just been science expedition goes to this moon, encounters this race, whether it's still the engineer as they are in the movie or the space jockey as we theorized it was and as it was portrayed in other media, and then there's a conflict between them and the humans without the alien, without the pathogen, without the mutagen, without all of that kind of stuff. That would have been totally fine, but they just teased too much. I mean, the fucking trailer showed the ship crashing, making you think, oh, this is the ship that crashed on LV-426, right? Certainly made me think that.
And I have to assume they did that on purpose to make you think, oh, maybe this is on 426,
Right. So they're fucking playing with us, man. And
then, like, oh, go ahead.
It just kind of muddies it, right? And I got to rant a little bit more. And then like it makes me think about what was so effective and terrifying about Alien in the first place, right? Space truckers answer a distress call, come in contact with an alien organism that breaks loose on their ship and starts killing everyone one by one. Scary premise. It's almost like Lovecraftian, right? Like these creatures from the dark reaches that we were never meant to find. And then we found it, and then it like fucks up humankind, right? Aliens, the same thing. Humans become colonizers and try to take over and mine the same moon for resources, and they encounter this species that just wipes them out, and it's just pure death and all of that. And it's relatively simple stories, but there's a lot to dive into in terms of the ideas and like survival and what it means when we start reaching outside of our comfort zone or whatever and start exploring and spreading out and what we're going to encounter and how we're not really prepared for any of it and the horrors that could be out there and all this kind of stuff. And then Prometheus is this story about, no, it turns out we were probably made by these aliens that kind of look like us, and then we did something to piss them off and they want to kill us now. The story's, it's a small movie. I mean, there's a crew of 17 plus one engineer, but it's a big, big story shoved into like a small little box. I don't know, man. It's not what I'm here for, I guess.
It certainly doesn't. I mean, I will admit, it sounds to me like I'm probably warmer on this movie than you, because I actually think it's a pretty good, like I actually do enjoy watching Prometheus. You are correct when you say that it doesn't feel like an alien movie, and more so, it's not what I want out of an Alien movie.
Yeah.
But I will, give it the caveat that they weren't trying to make an Alien movie. They were trying to make a movie that is canon to Alien, but they weren't trying to do the first one again, despite the fact that there are a lot of elements of this movie that are literally just the first one again. That's beside my
point. But even beyond that, then they're like, okay, so we've got this pathogen. It's going to infect Holloway. He's going to spread that to Shaw by sex, by sexing. They sex in space, which is kind of cool.
They certainly do.
She's going to get impregnated with this thing that she's going to cut out. By the way, a very visceral, genuinely terrifying scene in this when Shaw is trying to get the organism out of her in the med pod and everything. Like that's like the most memorable scene of the movie to me.
It's not the movie. It's not the scene from the movie that I remembered when I hadn't been watching it.
Yeah.
But when I was watching it last night, it all started to come back to me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, now it's all coming back to me. This fucking rules."
It was a very effective scene, and it probably felt the closest to an Alien movie because, again, you've got this organism inside somebody, and David's trying to like convince her to go back into hypersleep, and when they get back to Earth, they'll have it removed, right? Which is classic Weyland-Yutani bullshit, classic company tactics. And she's like fighting to get it out of her, and she succeeds, which is more than we could say for pretty much everybody else in the Alien
pretty
franchise.
Much everyone else, yeah.
But it's like then it grows into like this gigantic weird face hugger, but like more of a starfish. I think there's a term for this thing too. I don't know it.
I believe it is referred to as the trilobite. I believe is what the name of that creature is.
And then the trilobite eventually grabs onto the engineer and face hugs him, body hugs him, really.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, that was pretty cool to see. And then out of the engineer at the very end of the movie, the
literally final scene of the movie,
the deacon, as they call it, this proto xenomorph bursts out of it that has like a shorter distended jaw and is a different color and is a lot larger when it hatches, but a lot smaller than what the xenomorph would be. And so again, they're doing all of this stuff to be like you can tell me this isn't an Alien movie all day, but they're constantly reminding you that it's not an Alien movie, but it's still a fucking Alien movie. Like, even if the stuff looks a little different and operates a little different. And then they're just setting up these ideas of like, well, it's not an Alien movie, but this is like where the alien is going to be coming from, and
which,
and then that bugs me too, because the thing that is so terrifying about the Alien to me is, there's just this monster out there that has just always existed, and it's parasitic, and it can survive in the vacuum of space, and you just can't do anything about it. Like, if you come in contact with it, y'all are fucked. Like, that's scary.
Yeah, you're donezo. You're fucking toast. Like, you can't do anything about it. Like, it shows up, and that's just the end of it. You don't know anything else. You can't.
And that's much scarier to me than saying, oh, we found this brilliant alien race who created us and also somehow formed the creation of this thing. Like, I'm more afraid of the xenomorph making it to Earth than the engineer making it to Earth. Right.
Agreed.
So it's just a bad version of a story I would have liked to see instead, I guess.
I will say that there are some things like setting aside momentarily the fact that it's, claims to not be an Alien movie while it still totally is. There are parts of the movie, like in a vacuum, just watching it on its own. Yeah. There are a lot of individual parts of this movie that I really liked. Like the med bay scene that you mentioned, the med pod scene, I should say, was extremely cool. Maybe the most tense scene in the movie. First off, just as a side note, I'm just going to directly quote my notes here. The lamprey mouth is a very underutilized bit of biology you can see in a monster movie. And as far as I'm concerned, you should see it more because it looks creepy and weird on its own without even having to do anything to like monster it up.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it had like the weird like lamprey, like octopus mouth in the middle of its tentacles,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the one thing, or the other thing I should say, that I really, really liked about that scene, first off, like, it's long been like a discussion, an issue of people trying to figure out whether you can cut out a chest burster before it kills you and survive.
Sure.
I mean, in the canon of some of the comics, it's established that yes, you can, but those comics hadn't been made yet when this movie came out.
Right.
And okay, admittedly, in this movie, it's not actually a chest burster, but that's beside the point for the point I'm trying to make. It's, you know, it's long been debated whether it can be done or not. And this movie posits that generally speaking, yes, it can.
Yeah.
And afterwards, the thing that I really liked is you've seen Scream 2, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Remember that scene in Scream 2 when it was Sydney and I think it was like her roommate, maybe? I don't remember who the other person is. They're in the car that Ghostface crashes and gets knocked out, and they have to crawl over Ghostface's body and out of the driver's side window to get out of the car.
Because they were in the back of a cop car, so they couldn't open the doors.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there is a moment in that C-section scene that reminded me of that because, like, you know, the device pulls out the, you know, not yet fully grown trilobite and it's like hanging there and it's still kind of alive.
Yeah.
But since it's like dangling there right in the middle of the machine, the only way she can get out is to slip out from the bottom, which means she has to go right by it.
Super tense scene. Yeah.
And I thought that was extremely cool, a great touch, very tense. The one thing that pissed me off about it is, like a lot of the other scenes in this movie I really like, I wish that had gone on for longer. The C-section scene as a whole was good, but like the part where she has to slip by it by going right fucking in front of it, I wish that little bit had lasted for longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was ready for that scene to be over. Like, it was real tense. Like, you know, that was a very strong scene, and that idea of having to like slip like past. Here's a stupid version of that. Have you seen the movie Jason X?
I certainly have.
Absolutely a ripoff of the Alien movies. We all know that. Do you remember the scene where I forget her name, the final girl, the girl who got frozen and woke up in the future? She's got the gun and she's like trying to like sneak down this hallway and there's like a blade like sticking through it, right? So she's like trying to sneak past this blade, so she like crouches down and turns sideways and sneaks by with the like her neck passing like the space between the blade and the wall. And they're trying to create this tension like, oh, is he going to shove the thing through and kill her, right?
Yep.
Super tense for the first second, and then you realize there's about 3 feet underneath this thing that she could have just normally crawled underneath.
Yeah. All she had to do was crouch down a little bit lower and she would have been fine.
Just get your whole head under there. Jason X sucks.
Agreed. Hardest possible agree. Official crew expendable viewpoint. Jason X, thumbs down.
It's fun the first time to watch and kind of laugh at. That's it. We're going to have to watch that one when we talk about our Alien knockoff movies at some point.
Probably. I don't want to say I'm fine with that because I don't really want to watch it again. But if we decide to do it, I'm willing to.
I've decided for us. We're doing it sometime.
Fair enough.
Okay. One thing I do want to say that I like about this movie, and this is going to tie back into something I was saying earlier. I like the atmosphere of it. The atmosphere feels very alien, you know? I mean, I like the idea of like, we're an expedition ship and we're exploring this alien land, and a lot of this architecture or whatever you want to call it, these caverns and stuff of this structure, like definitely evoke the alien hives as we've seen them in other things. Like thematically, it's very similar, and just like, yeah, the exploration part is cool. I like it. The score is pretty exceptional. The music of the movie, Mark Streitenfeld, I think, is the composer.
I'm going to pull a Corey here and say that honestly, when I'm watching the movie, I don't really notice the score while I'm watching it.
I think it's a very effective score because it goes between this, you know, these kind of eerie alien soundscapes and this sort of grand, optimistic music of like this science crew discovering this thing and going to check it out and everything. So like, I think it works. I think it's one of the strongest parts of the movie also is the score. I read in the trivia that the composer, he had everyone play the songs backwards. Like he wrote the music, then he wrote the music backwards and recorded it backwards and then reversed it to make it sound kind of alien and eerie. And I think it probably worked out. Like, I don't know if you have to go through all those steps, but I'm also not a musician, you know. You are. Maybe you should like write a piece of music, just flip it around, write it backwards, record that, and then see if it sounds like how you thought it would. Maybe there's something to that idea. I don't know, man.
I will say, thinking about it now, and again, for like the 85th time so far, consulting my notes, there is actually one specific point in the movie that I did notice the music, and it actually ties into a scene in the movie I didn't really like.
Okay.
And it's actually the one I mentioned to you last night. There is a scene where, like, you know, David is inside the control room of the engineer ship because they discovered it was a ship by this point. And he sees like an old like hologram or whatever of like the group of engineers running into the control room, setting everything up and getting everything, you know, starting the ship up and getting ready to go. And there is a moment where like a whole like galaxy or whatever is projected in a big hollow map like in the center of the room, and he's like, you know, and it's all like in the shimmering like green holographic light, and he's like looking at all the planets and finds Earth at one point and is looking at it holographically, and like the music swells in like this big like dramatic, emotionally impactful like horn part, and it swells up and gets big. And there is a scene, or there's a shot in that scene where you see him looking at like, you know, the holographic map or whatever, and it shoots him from above, and he has his arms out in what the kids would call a T pose, and he's looking up into the camera and he spins around in a circle. and my first thought was literally Julie Andrews ass MF.
I'm just thinking.
It was like the exact shot. She was spinning around in the same way. There's a big, like, dramatic, impactful horn swell, and I was like, "This is fucking The Sound of Music for 5 seconds," and I don't know why.
You know how like he was quoting Lawrence of Arabia? I think like throughout the movie, was it Lawrence of Arabia?
It was like apparently his like hair was modeled after T.E. Lawrence, and I was like, sure, man, whatever.
Well, like, what if, like, when he was doing that, viewing that map and in the T pose and spinning around, he was like, with arms wide open under the sunlight. He just starts like breaking into a Creed song.
I would say, so it's less Sound of Music and more Creed.
Someone walks in and they're like, what is that? And he's like, just some lines from a song I love.
Yeah, an old ancient historical song. I can't stop listening.
That's why he's so obsessed with like God and like creation and being a creator, dude. He's a big Creed fan.
He's a Creed guy.
It makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
We've cracked the code.
I bet it's in the deleted scenes. He's just listening to the Creed song from Scream 3.
All right.
Oh, God, there's something else I wanted to touch on. Oh, all of the weird engineer recordings where they like replay the holograms of whatever happened in this facility and on this ship, like the outbreak. Cool idea. I don't understand the practicality of it in universe. Was that just like the black box? Right?
Yeah. Like what was recording it and for what purpose?
Because we know that something broke out in this ship, right? Like something happened. All of the engineers were running around crazy. The ship never launched. All of them died. Right. We see one of them get their head cut off by a door, which is the head they take back to the ship and try to experiment on. And they can see that it's infected during that experiment, which is kind of cool. And then it explodes. Right.
It certainly does.
So was that just like the engineer's black box? Like fail-safes kicked in from this point. We're going to start recording what happened here in case our other engineer buddies come to this planet to investigate why we didn't go destroy Earth, because that was their mission, to destroy Earth. What exactly happened? I just would have rather seen the scene of that happening. I would have rather seen these dudes running around in their elephant suits. Like, I think that would have been, honestly, that might have been a better opening scene than the scene with the engineer, creating life, because that scene had nothing to do with the rest of the movie, honestly. Like, it wasn't
Certainly
connected to any of it, Put that scene in Covenant, right?
Yeah. May as well. That'll also tie in better to the themes of that movie, really.
Yeah, totally. Also, a little tidbit I noticed when they're carbon dating the beheaded engineer body, they date it to about 2,000 years ago, which is interesting. I think this might be in the deleted scenes. It's certainly been talked about in interviews. I think this was another Damon Lindelof contribution, that even though Shaw and the Prometheus team never find out why the engineers were going to go to Earth, apparently the reason, I think this, is that roughly 2,000 years ago, an engineer that was living on Earth was murdered, and that engineer was apparently Jesus Christ.
That's certainly an idea they thought up and could have put in the movie, that's for sure.
And I think the only fragment of that we see is the carbon dating of about 2,000 years ago, right? So that would put it around 80. 90, 80,
you are correct.
Give or take.
I had heard that before. I remembered that it wasn't in the movie, but I couldn't remember whether it was ever supposed to be or not. Like, I don't remember if it was a deleted scene that got cut,
right,
or if it was just like something they created to just like put in some backstory, like not having the intention of it ever actually being in the movie to begin with.
Yeah.
But you are correct. I had heard that before, and I'll just go back to what I said before. What an idea. You can take that however you like.
God, if that would fuck up Alien canon so badly.
I mean, it would fuck up Alien canon more than Prometheus and Covenant already do, baby.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that would have been a bad idea. It's an interesting idea. It's totally the kind of thing that you come up with, like, yo, what if one of the engineers was Jesus, right?
Bong rip.
Bong rip. This movie's got weird ideas about like faith and everything, because like you've got Holloway calling Shaw a skeptic, but she's also like super faith, like still has her faith and like wears the cross, and the dream where she's talking to her dad about death and how their God is different from Christian God and all of that kind of stuff. So these themes are there for the movie then to be like, yeah, but it's all aliens, right? It's all just space aliens. God is a space alien. The son of God was one of these big engineer man, and you guys killed him, and that made the rest of the space gods mad, and they were totally going to come murder your planet, except somebody dropped a vial of pathogen and fucked the whole thing up, It's, I don't know, man.
Yeah, you are correct when you said that is not an idea that should have been in the movie. It's an interesting idea to just think up, be like, oh man, it'd be like fucking weird or whatever. But like, I would not, if I were making the movie, I would have heard that and went, how about not we do that?
Yeah, but the DNA of it is still there.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, it's answering things nobody asked, right? And then it's setting a bunch of other stuff that it has no intention to answer. And
ultimately doesn't even really matter what the answer is.
No.
Because it's like, for instance, like, where did the engineers come from? Why did they make humanity? Why do they want to kill humanity after making them? Right. That's all an interesting idea, like in a vacuum, but like, it's a fucking alien movie. I don't give a shit about what the engineers were thinking. Like, just give me more aliens,
Right. Or make this a very specific movie between the engineers and the humans, and leave the alien stuff completely out of it. Like, I really think that would have been a stronger movie if they had separated it from the alien stuff even more. Like, we would know, like we would see the engineers in the suits and the ship, and we would recognize that from Alien. Take the pathogen stuff out of it. Take out all this implications that like it's a bioweapon created by them or whatever. We'll talk more about that on future episodes. My theories and your theories. Remove the alien DNA completely. Just have it be humans versus the aliens that may or may not have created humans, and don't pull the other stuff into it. And I think you got a great movie that would be a great companion piece to the original that wouldn't fuck with the legacy.
Yeah, it's structured exactly like an Alien movie. If you had made the aliens something that's not a xenomorph, but in every other way, kept it an alien movie.
Right.
It's weird.
It's like they chickened out and they're like, we better put some alien shit in this or else nobody's going to watch this. I'd fucking watch it. I would have watched it if none of that stuff had been in there. If it had just been man versus their creator, like that's a pretty sick idea. It's just when you try to force it, like when you try to pull these other elements in, that's when it lost me. That's honestly really when it lost me. That and how stupid the crew was taking your space helmet off inside this thing. Like they were all fucking helmets off when Holloway was in there already infected. Like,
yeah,
bad
like
protocols.
Shaw, like when Holloway starts taking his helmet off, Shaw's like, no, don't do this. It's stupid. And then like you can hear on the radio people back in the ship going, no, Holloway, don't fucking take that helmet off. That is an extremely bad idea. And then he takes it off and like breathes one or two heavy breaths and looks at everyone. And then Shaw just kind of looks at him and shrugs and goes, fuck it, and just takes her helmet off as well. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh, you rascal. Okay, helmets off, everybody. Like, kind of, I don't know, man. Like, maybe it's just post-pandemic stuff, right? But like, Holloway's an anti-masker, that's for sure. And we saw how that ended for him. I'm just saying. He was showing signs of infection before they went back the next day to try to find Fifield and the other guy who sucked.
In my notes I have that pair listed as Fifield and Glasses Guy because I couldn't remember what his name is. I think it's like Milburn, I think is his name or something like that. But yeah, I literally called him Glasses Guy in my notes.
It's Milburn. It's played by Rafe Spall. Yeah, they were stupid too. Like, oh look, there's this weird alien worm we've discovered after we've been fucking terrified about being in here for hours. I'm gonna go fuck with it, right?
That scene is, I mean, there's individual moments of that scene that are really cool, but like the overall thrust of it is me just going, come on, guys, what are you fucking doing? What are you doing?
Again, yeah, it's just incompetence all around. And like, this was $1 trillion Wayland project, right? He put a lot of money and faith in this and like had a clear goal. And they hired these people and didn't tell them what the mission was for. They clearly didn't properly vet any of them for what they were potentially going to encounter. Because like nobody was on the same team, like in this whole fucking movie, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Everyone, it just sucked. Cool tech stuff though. Fifield's pups, those mapping pups, that was cool. Yep. The vehicles were cool. It all felt, like it existed in the world of Alien based on other technology that we've seen. One criticism I always heard about this is how like advanced the Prometheus is versus like the Nostromo, like I'm a little bit of the opinion that it would have been cool if they had made the tech look like the tech from the 70s that they made to look futuristic back in Alien. But like you can also explain it away like, well, this is a vanity ship. This is a research project. This is not a
this is, as they point out in the movie, $1 trillion ship designed to hold Peter Wayland himself,
Right. Yeah. He's not traveling in a
on the Nostromo.
He's not traveling in a big rig, This is his fucking Tesla super truck or whatever that thing is called.
Going through my notes here. There was a couple other things. Here's something that I was kind of curious about. This doesn't need to lead into a big discussion. It's just, this didn't make a lot of sense to me personally. So I just figured you may have a better viewpoint on this than me. The scene, well, I don't want to say the scene where Holloway and Shaw have sex, but like the part of that scene before they have sex, when she reveals that she's infertile and he's like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it like that. And then they start making out and then they have sex.
Yeah.
What I was wondering about that scene was like, did he like not know before right then that she was infertile?
No, he knew, but he was just like so in his feels about being disappointed that they didn't meet living engineers. Because he's just a shitty guy. Like, he just sucks, honestly. He wasn't
True.
thinking about anybody but himself in that moment. You know, he was half in the bottle already. He had also just unknowingly drank pathogen that David put in his drink, in a very obvious, like, you could see him clearly dip his finger in. Holloway would have seen that too. It was
absolutely
strange.
like they were looking at each other when he did
Holloway
it.
was staring at the glass, just like anxious for another shot of booze when that happened. Yeah, I think he's just
he's just a jackass. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, he just
fair enough.
He just kind of fucking sucks.
There was one other thing that I wanted to ask about that is just like, again, didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I was wondering what your perspective on it was. Sure. I would like to take a minute to have you explain to me why it matters fucking at all to the movie that Vickers is Waylon's daughter.
Oh man, that was only there, I think, to show how badly Peter Wayland sucks. Because when he's doing that video intro, right, where he's first of all, nobody, well, I guess they knew because Vickers told people that Wayland was her father, right? Like, she definitely referenced that, I think, in dialogue. But in his little vlog, he's like, "This is David." First of all, it's really fucked up because, and we'll have to circle back around to this. When Wayland's like, "This is David. I've created him. He's the closest to a son I'll ever have."
And then when he says that, it cuts to a shot of Meredith just looking steely like always.
Right. And then he says something shitty like, "But he'll never be human," or something like that.
Yeah, he says something to the effect of, again, to paraphrase, I designed him to be able to do everything a human can do, but the one difference between him and a person is that he doesn't have a soul.
That's
or
what
something
it is. Yes.
to that effect.
Yeah. So in one speech, he has insulted his daughter by pointing out that she is not his son and he really wanted a son, which is probably what drove him to make David in the first place, because he's like a shitty dude worried about his legacy and doesn't value women as human beings, clearly. But then also, like, kicked the shit out of David, who understands human emotions even if he's not feeling him. Like, it's very clear that they inform his actions and he reacts to them even if he isn't quote unquote feeling them. He's still feeling them, you know.
I got you.
So that's the reason. That's the reason why. Just to set up, I think honestly, to set up plans they had for David for the future of the franchise. We'll see. We'll definitely talk about more of that stuff when we talk about Covenant, because I think that's when where a lot of that payoff is. And I think it was also to justify Vickers' shitty mood about the entire expedition, like, because she so very clearly doesn't want to be there and hates that she's doing it and hates that she has to, you know?
Yeah.
And clearly hates her dad, understandably.
Yeah.
That's why I can't villainize her completely, because, like, she's in a shitty position. And much like Ellen Ripley in Alien, she's the only one who's like, hey, we have somebody who's been clearly infected by something alien and we don't know anything about it. He's not coming on board.
Yep.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, she definitely pulled that, but it worked that time.
It worked that time. Yeah. Little did she know he had already been on board and spread around, you know.
Can't win them all.
Wear a condom, kids.
That's right.
Yeah. And all right. So let's just touch on one more. I got one more thing I want to touch on. The gigantic complaint that I hear repeated all the time and have heard ever since I saw the movie in the theaters. Somebody made a joke about it online. I think Penny Arcade made a comic about it at the time when the Covenant ship, look at me, when the engineer ship is crashing and Vickers and Shaw are trying to run away from the crashed ship and it starts rolling and they're still kind of running in its path instead of running to the sides. What is your take on that? Like,
well, in the moment, like while I was watching the movie, I just generically took it as they were trying to escape. I know the main complaint is, why don't they run sideways?
Right.
And after the fact, my immediate thought was, yeah, they probably could have. But like when I was watching the movie, that thought didn't really occur to me because I was like, oh, fuck, they're about to be crushed by a big ass spaceship, you know?
Yeah.
So like the thought didn't occur to me at the time. And then after the fact, I was like, they probably could have, but it's not something that's like so stupid or egregious enough that it like pisses me off that they didn't. Like maybe because like in that situation, I didn't think about it, so maybe they just didn't as well.
Sure. Yeah. My reading of it is that like it's a big ship, it's a wide ship, right? And it was pretty fucking close to them. I think if they had stopped and tried to run sideways or even run at an angle, there's still a very real chance that they wouldn't have gotten clear of it in time.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't rolling perfectly straight. And even though Shaw like trips and rolls out of the way, it makes it look really easy. Like she could clearly have gotten away from it. She might have been running at a kind of an angle the whole time, or it kind of could have made a turn away from her. And then when it finally stops after it smooshes Vickers, it tips over and still like almost crushes her and like catches her foot. Is that right?
Yeah. She gets pinned, not between it and a rock, but she gets pinned in like the triangular space between the ship, a rock, and the ground.
Right. So like she running sideways, she still barely escaped that thing. Like I don't think that it was as simple as just run 90 degrees and you'll be fine. Like that thing was big and could have tipped any which way and could have been rolling any which way. I don't think that that's the dumbest part of this movie, I guess is my short.
Yeah, it certainly is not. That's for sure.
And it doesn't feel like the kind of thing that you should get hung up on. What you should get hung up on is the scientists on an alien planet taking their fucking helmets off. That was dumb.
I will say, very briefly on the, running away from the alien ship scene that we were just talking about. Yeah. A couple of thoughts I had about it is that scene is like a scene that I always heard everyone talking about before I had seen it.
Right.
To the point where before seeing Prometheus, like other than the fact that I knew it was tied to the Alien movies, the only thing that I knew about it was the movie where they apparently run away wrong from a big ring rolling after.
Yeah, it became a meme, right?
And like the other thing about it though is when I was watching it last night, like I said, like I was taken in during the scene. It didn't occur to me at the time because I was just caught up in, the moment and the visuals and the excitement of it and everything. But there are a couple of things that I noticed about it after the fact. Like, first off, the scene's not actually that long.
No.
Considering how important it is and how like outsized importance and like how that's the scene everyone was talking about.
Yeah.
I was very surprised to find out that scene is from the last like 15 minutes of the movie.
Right.
Like for something that they talk about, that everyone talks about so much, I wasn't expecting it to happen so late in the movie. And the other thing that I had completely forgotten about was, I just thought it was like, oh, they were running away from a big ring. Like contextually speaking, that's what I understood about it.
Yeah.
I had completely forgotten that it wasn't a ring. It was a fucking engineer ship that was rolling down the hill after them.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, overall, I did honestly think that scene was pretty cool. It wasn't exciting necessarily in the way I necessarily want an alien movie to be. Right. But like this movie, like the alien movies, like, Alien, for instance, is a science fiction horror movie that's more horror than it is science fiction.
Yeah.
This movie is a science fiction horror movie that's more science fiction than it is horror. So it's fine.
That's a good point, actually. That's a good point that really highlights the difference.
Yeah, I mean, this is the science fiction part of the science fiction horror franchise. There are still some horrific elements, the C-section, for instance.
Yes.
There's a few other parts that, like, my main complaint with them was that it wasn't long enough and I would have liked more of them. Yeah. Like, there's actually a few different parts in the movie that I was actually... Well, I suppose before I transition into that, I should ask, is there anything else that's about this movie that's stuck in your craw that you want to complain about?
I don't think so. I think, I've been pretty hard on this movie, which you guys are going to be surprised when I tell you how I actually feel. No, I think I'm good. I think I'm good.
So then I just like to go through a few parts of the movie that I did enjoy, that I thought was really cool, and honestly, I would have liked to see more of. And my main complaint about these issues, or that these scenes, is that they didn't go on for long enough.
Oh, can I get in with one?
Go right ahead.
I would have watched David just like hanging out on the ship, shooting baskets and riding a unicycle and watching movies for like an hour and a half. I would have just watched that movie.
Also, real quick side note, do you remember what movie it was he was watching?
I think it wasn't he watching. Was he watching Lawrence of Arabia?
I don't remember for sure. So probably, but like, I honestly, like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I did think that scene was fun. It kind of annoyed me. He was wearing like weird, like almost Birkenstock style, like flip-flop sandals, but he still had like the rest of like the nice, crisp, like silver suit otherwise. And it felt very European to wear sandals with a suit, and it really made me laugh.
It is Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah.
All right. But yeah, there are a couple of parts that I wanted to point out that I did like going back to the still laughing about it now, the, as you called it, the vlog that Peter Wayland they showed of his earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
During that part, like, he's like, David is the son that I never had or whatever. And then it cuts to Vickers and she has like this look like, this motherfucker on her face. And then a little bit later in the scene, as we mentioned, he's like, the one thing David doesn't have is a soul. And like when he says that, it cuts to a close up of David, and he has like just like this flat, like blank, emotionless look on his face.
His David face.
Except he's not actually flat or blank or emotionless.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever read the Watchmen comic?
Yes.
Do you remember that scene when
Ozymandias is saying like, you may not, like, I can read Dr. Manhattan's facial expression.
That's the one. That's what it reminded me of. Like, it cut to that shot of David's like blank expressionless face, but Michael Fassbender is a phenomenal actor. And so you can see like genuine hurt, like just underneath that blank facade. And it reminded me of that scene in Watchmen where Ozymandias is like, it might be the merest twitch of the lip to everyone else, but to me it's as obvious as if he was screaming in agony or whatever the line is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought that was a just masterclass, phenomenal little chunk of acting on Michael Fassbender's part there. I thought it was
100%. We don't deserve him. And I said this earlier, but next time in Alien Covenant, we get to see him kiss himself.
Yeah, I mean, he's both of the main characters in that movie, so we get to see twice.
Hot Fassbender on Fassbender action is the first thing I told my friends about Alien Covenant.
You mentioned earlier when they find the engineer's head and they wanted to like, dissect it or whatever, but they discover it's infected and then it blows up.
Yes.
My notes on the movie that I took literally said that scene where they blow up the engineer's head is cool, period. No notes.
I
just thought it was cool.
I did like that. And I did like that as the reveal of these aliens. The space jockey doesn't look like what we thought it looked like. That it's a helmet. It's still kind of like bio, like a, it's still got like some organicness to it. But when they peel that thing off and reveal the oddly human looking head underneath, like I thought that was a pretty good reveal of the engineer that lost a little something because of that opening scene. We had already seen them,
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of their bio suits, also there's, I think it's like going back to what we were talking about earlier, like one of those like, holographic like black box videos or whatever.
Yes.
Or maybe it was when they meet the last engineer in person. I actually don't remember what scene it is, but like the one where like we see the engineer suiting up and he puts on the suit, and then when he wraps it around himself, it kind of like just automatically like tightens and absorbs in on himself
that was
to
when,
like create that rib cage look. I thought that look was really neat. Like it just kind of like hermetically seals in like instantly. I just thought that was a cool little visual.
That was when David was in the command center, like the cockpit, and watching them start like learning how to play the flute to start this spaceship.
Couple other things is the scene where Fifield and whatever his name was, Milburn, when they get owned by what I have here in the notes is the snake thing, because I forgot what its name is. Later on, I looked it up, and its official name is the Hammerpede.
Yes, the Hammerpede.
That guy, I thought that scene overall was pretty cool, but my favorite part about it is after I think it's Fifield is the one that gets the pathogen inside of his helmet, and when like his face starts to melt or whatever, like when it melts, the glass on his helmet, it seals like hermetically against his face, and it makes his face look like a skull for a second. And I thought that visual was real fucking cool.
Yeah, and then another nice thing I noticed when they were escaping from the Prometheus, like when they were escaping from the engineer structure, and the storm is coming, and you see the storm kind of like wash over the cliffs and the landscape, and there's like this skull that's been like carved into one of the cliff sides. That was pretty sick too. And
also, as a little side note, that scene where Milburn and Fifield get owned by the Hammerpede, it's extremely funny to me that the only reason they got killed was because Vickers and Yannick were off having sex, which, LOL, let's be real.
Good for them, though.
I mean, yes, it's true. Good for them. I'm glad they hooked up, but it's just extremely funny to me that is the reason the creators of this movie decided was why no one was around to hear them getting killed.
Yeah, they're playing on like those classic like horror slasher movie tropes, right?
They certainly were, and it made me laugh.
The same reason Fifield and Mulligan, I already forgot his name. Milburn. The same reason they got stuck in there and died is the same reason Jason Voorhees drowned at Camp Crystal Lake.
That is correct.
Yeah.
It all, to quote Matthew McConaughey, time is a flat circle. So, everything's connected.
So kids, don't have sex.
I also thought it was cool in like, I don't remember if it was right before, I think it was right after Holloway and Shaw hook up. Holloway goes into the bathroom and does that classic thing everyone always does ever, splashes water on your face.
Yeah.
You know, that thing everyone does that, everyone does in real life. But like,
well, he wasn't feeling
when he's looking at himself in the mirror and that little like worm or whatever pokes out of his eye. God, that was so cool.
That was cool. Yeah. Yes, that was cool.
Let's see. Going back to Byfield and Milburn for a moment. Specifically the part where when they go back into the ship and like find their corpses or whatever, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I'm pretty sure body horror is my favorite kind of horror movie. Okay. And so as such, I am a big fan of stuff inside of other stuff that it shouldn't be inside of. And so when they find their corpse and they find, I think it's Milburn is the one that got mouthed. Yeah, because Fifield is the one that got burned. And so, Milburn's the one that got mouthed by the Hammerpede. Yeah. And so, like, they find his corpse and, like, you see something inside of his empty eye socket. Yeah. But since he's, like, dead, it looks like it's just, like, viscera or whatever. But then it moves and the Hammerpede jumps out of his empty eye socket. Yeah. And again, a little tiny moment in that movie that it was just exactly what I wanted. I love it when stuff is inside of other stuff. It's so great.
See, and I definitely have issues with body horror. I think largely because of seeing Alien when I was 6 or 7 years old. So
that'll do it.
Yeah, man. There is a lot of good stuff in this movie. I've been pretty fucking hard on it. I've been hard on it as being an Alien movie and wishing that, like, they didn't try to like put those threads in as hardcore as they did, I think you've still got a very successful movie. Like you could still have the Hammerpeed happen. It just wouldn't be a mutated worm. It would just be a thing that's on this ship, right? Like you could still have a lot of these things happen without having to try to force this connection to like this familiarity to the alien, to the xenomorph in particular, right? Like that's kind of what I'm saying, that without that stuff, I think that there's a pretty strong movie here if maybe we gave the characters a little bit more depth.
Yeah, it would have been nice.
Anything else you want to touch on, or should we
there was one other thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
There's actually two other small things I wanted to mention. One of them, the last engineer, just conceptually finding one that's alive, and then he wakes up and sees them and immediately is like, absolutely not, and just starts wrecking people. That was great.
That was cool.
I wish it had gone on for longer and been more violent.
I loved when he got out of his sleeping pod and he's just kind of like, in my head, he like yawns and stretches and he sort of climbs out and he like can't exactly stand up, you know, because he's been in hypersleep for 2,000 years or whatever, or in suspended animation for 2,000 years. And he just sort of like seems a little groggy when he gets out there. I was really into that. Kind of really made him feel human, you know?
Yeah.
And it was an interesting balance versus like how many years had they been asleep on the Prometheus, and when Shaw wakes up, she's like vomiting because her body's in shock from being in sleep so long.
Yeah, they were in hypersleep for like 2 years and she's throwing up. The engineer was asleep for like 2,000 years and he just looks at him and goes, "Go," and then starts punching them.
Yeah, David says some shit and then he just like rips David's head off and kills an old man.
And like, that was what I thought was really cool. Like, he shows up and he's like, you know, he's humanoid, but he's massive. He has all these little tiny uncanny valley style differences that makes it clear that he's not actually human.
Yeah.
And he just starts wrecking shop, picking people up, throwing them around, bashing them really hard. But it's like he only attacks a couple of people. And like you said, one of them is a very old guy that basically immediately gets taken out in one hit. He like hits a guy, throws another guy, kicks a third guy, and then like 45 seconds after he started fighting them, he's stopped fighting them and left. And I'm like, I wish I would have been able to see him wreck a few more people. And then later on, when they, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, pull an alien, and Shaw's the only one left alive, and then the alien trying to kill her shows up where she is while she's trying to escape on a pod.
Yeah.
And like, David's like, the engineers are coming your way, and Shaw's like, what? And turns around and the engineer busts through the door.
Yes.
And then I was so ready to just like, you know, watch that engineer almost wreck her up. And then she's like standing there in front of the door, and then he reaches towards her, and then she immediately just opens the door and the trilobite comes out and attacks the engineer. And I'm like, there should have been an actual fight in some form right there.
Yeah.
That would have been so much cooler.
I mean, I'm here for like monster on monster fights all day, but there wasn't much of a fight either between the last engineer and the trilobite. But
it was just the trilobite grabs onto the engineer, and the engineer's like swatting at it, and the trilobite's just like, nope, and just pulls him in. And it's like, yeah, I would have wanted like more of like a Godzilla versus Kong kind of thing. You know, that would have been nice.
Weirdly, I would have liked to see Shaw take a swipe at him with the axe and cut him. I think it would have been fascinating just to see like the engineer bleeding red or something, or whatever color the engineer might be bleeding. Right.
I think when the deacon bursts out of him at the end of the movie, isn't his blood like dark green or purple or black or something like that?
It's like blackish, but I thought that might have just been some weird residue from, you know, the pathogen that's running through all of the monsters we've seen in this, right? But it could have been like an interesting poetic moment. Shaw has finally met the creator of mankind. We were created in their image, right? And if she cut him with the axe and sees him like bleed red or something, it would have been some nice symbolism.
Yeah, like,
It would've-
the scene from the end of the first 300 movie when he misses with the spear,
Yes.
but like grazes his cheek and he's like, oh my God, I'm bleeding.
Right. And then Jesse Ventura comes in and says, if it bleeds, we can kill it.
That's right.
Predator reference.
And I suppose then the best part or the best place to end the episode would be the end of the movie. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I'm framing this very specifically for a reason.
Okay. I'll try to play along.
Well, it's not hard to because you saw this movie when it first came out.
Yeah.
So when the movie came out, before you had seen Covenant, did you think ending to this movie and how Shaw's storyline wraps up for this movie specifically?
Yeah.
Did you think it was a satisfying conclusion to both her arc and the movie's narrative story?
No. I thought that she decided to trust David way too easily after everything that she had just experienced. And I know like there were moments like after her operation when she discovers that Peter Wayland is still alive and she's like in pain, that David like comes to her aid, you know? But she's still very much like, why should I help you? Like, you're still at fault for all of this stuff, David. And he's like, well, because I can fly this ship and take you home.
And she basically goes, yeah, all right, fine, fair enough.
Right. The thing that if you overthink it, you think like, okay, well, what's she going to eat on this journey to this alien planet? Who knows how long and how far it is? It was at least 2 years back to Earth, right? And you could say maybe she packed some of those protein packets from the med pod into her
lifeboat,
into her duffel bag with David's head. Very funny that she sticks his head in the duffel bag, by the way.
And then apologizes to him. She's like, sorry. And he's like, it's fine.
It's quite all right.
That's what it was.
But like my assumption is like, okay, so most likely she's going to go into one of these sleep pods on the other, whatever the other engineer ship is, and just sleep through the journey, right?
And just like trust that David's going to take them where he said he was going to.
Exactly. She puts way too much trust into him any way you slice it. Like if because first of all, she's going to have to put him back together, right?
Yeah.
So that he can fly the ship, or she's going to have to stay awake the whole time and fly the ship and not eat it. It's just, yeah, I don't know. The concept, I was cool with the concept of her being like, I'm not going back. This movie raised too many questions and I'm going to go find answers. Like at that point, she was the audience surrogate, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, please go find some answers because I could use some now. I didn't want any going into this, but now I need a few, you know?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So mixed. I mean, like the rest of the movie, kind of a mixed bag for me.
I'll admit, I did, again, like I didn't really have much of an opinion about it either way when I watched it the first time because,
Right.
Unlike you, when I saw it, Covenant was already out.
Sure.
And so, like, I knew that however this movie ended, it ultimately didn't matter because I could just immediately go on to the next movie and find out what happens next.
Yeah. Find the continuing adventures of David and Shaw, specifically Shaw, the new protagonist of the series.
And so the first time that I watched it, I didn't really think about the ending at all. But when I watched it last night, I was really going out of my way because, like, since we know where and how it ends up now that we've seen Covenant books around, I was really I was really going out of my way to really be like, trying to put myself in the mindset of like, this movie specifically, is this ending? Is it satisfying? Does it work? And ultimately, I've arrived at the conclusion that I think it is probably pretty satisfying, more for it being how the narrative trip of this specific movie ends. Because, like, the thing of it is we know how it ends, and we also know what happens afterwards because we've both seen Covenant.
Right.
And it's hard for me to determine how I feel about how this movie ends when I know what happens afterwards, and that colors my opinion of how the ending of this movie goes.
Yeah.
And so, like my disappointment with it only really comes from when you factor in what gets revealed in Covenant. And so discounting that, I do think the way this movie ends is, good. Like you said, it's like kind of becomes an audience surrogate. Like both her and us as viewers have spent the last 2 hours of time not knowing what's going on and getting more questions than answers. And finally, we're like, let's actually get some real ass answers up in this bitch.
Yeah.
And that's what she decides to do at the end. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I want to have happen, because like she said, like every other crew member is dead. And like, if she goes back to Earth, what's she going to get there? She's just going to be like, oh, I, had the opportunity to find these answers and I didn't. And she's going to spend the rest of her life regretting it.
Plus there's, the added implication that she's bringing an alien ship back to Earth, which presumably has not happened up to this point, and the questions that would raise, and God knows what, like the military would get involved even earlier than they do in the rest of the series. Like it was probably it's for the story, being that this is a prequel, they were right to not return her to Earth, because how would they then explain? Like then Earth knows. Yeah. Earth knows about the engineers. Earth knows what the ship looks like. They know what the derelict is on LV-426 once they see it because of this ship. Like it would just open a whole nother can of worms. So they couldn't send her home successfully either way, just from like a storytelling perspective,
I should say that I don't think I think about it now. I'd like to slightly correct what I said. I don't think it was necessarily a fully satisfying ending, but I would rank it as a nice ending. It didn't give me everything I want, but I didn't object to it. It made sense, and I understand why they did it. So I don't think I necessarily found it as satisfying, but I was like, yeah, okay, I can accept that. It was acceptable.
So I'll say, for me as a movie watcher, I will sit through some absolute bullshit to see something cool. Like I call this the Jurassic World effect. Okay. Have you seen Jurassic World?
I have.
Okay. So Jurassic World is a movie, much like Prometheus, honestly, full of people making terrible decisions constantly. Everybody making the wrong choice. The whole movie, everyone is making the wrong fucking choice constantly. So I'm frustrated watching Jurassic World. I'm like, what? This is stupid. Why are they doing that? Why does this guy think he can fly that helicopter? Why does this kid think he can take this little sphere off the path, right? Like, this isn't going to end well for anybody. Why do humans think they can train raptors? This is dumb. Yeah. Why does the military think they can weaponize it, etc.? A lot of the very similar themes to this movie in particular, and some of the other entries in the Alien franchise. And I'm like, this is stupid. Why is anybody doing this? But at the end of Jurassic World, thanks to everyone making stupid wrong choices for the previous hour and 40 minutes or whatever, I got to see a raptor and a T-Rex fight a giant T-Rex raptor hybrid, and it was sick. So I was like, oh, that's why everyone did stupid things, because they wanted to get to this point, and the only way to get to this point is to make a bunch of dumb shit happen. And I'm glad that I'm watching this now. Like I'll sit through that movie. I'll sit through every minute of that movie just being angry, just to get to that dinosaur fight at the end. And then the 9-year-old in me like backflips, right? Because it's cool.
There is a movie similarly like I have seen Jurassic World a couple of times. Yes, there is a similar movie that I don't want to say I feel quite that same way, because your description of it is an hour and a half of bullshit and then 20 minutes of really good stuff.
Yeah.
And there is a movie vaguely similar to that, in that I'm sitting there for like an hour and a half waiting for the thing that I know is coming. The difference is that the movie I'm citing is still enjoyable and good, and I actually like watching it for that initial hour and a half.
Okay.
But that's basically what the David Cronenberg remake of The Fly is. Because like, even though the entire movie rules and I love it, when I'm watching The Fly, I'm watching it because I'm waiting to see him turn into a human fly, and that doesn't happen until the last like 15 or 20 minutes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like, I'm watching the movie because I want to see that, and then while I'm watching it, I'm still enjoying and getting super invested in all the other stuff. But like, I'm here because I want to see the David Cronenberg monster effects of Jeff Goldblum turning into a damn fly.
Yeah, you get it. So while Jurassic World gave me the payoff at the end of Jurassic World, and therefore I didn't feel like I had wasted my time. Prometheus didn't give me the payoff that I wanted. It was still a movie full of people making bad decisions, but the end did promise I was going to get something that I think ultimately I did want, which would be Shaw and David going to the engineer homeworld and having to deal with that stuff. Like, that idea is an interesting idea to me because she's seen these guys. She knows what they're all about, and she's still gonna like fly straight into the lion's den, you know? Like,
yeah, I did also think that was a neat idea.
yeah. So I think that I was cautiously hopeful for, well, I don't think I liked the ending. I liked the implication of what was coming next based on the ending. I wish I had gotten a little bit more of a satisfying conclusion in Prometheus itself, but it did keep me on the hook for whatever was going to come next.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Final point I'd like to make before we wrap it up. R.I.P. Janek.
R.I.P. Janek, yes.
He ruled, and I loved him, and he was one of the best characters in the movie, and he was great. Sincere R.I.P. to Idris Elba's character in Prometheus.
Captain Janek flying, turning the ship into basically a giant missile, they said, by whatever he was having them do to the engines inside the atmosphere, ramming that engineer ship, knocking it out of the sky. Like and then like the way he lays down the law with Vickers, he's like, I'm launching pods in 2 minutes. So if you want out of here to your escape pod, your lifeboat with 2 years of life in it, you better go now.
My specific note says R.I.P. Janek, Benedict Wong, and other guy is the note that I wrote.
R.I.P. other guy.
Also, interesting little tidbit. Apparently, his character in the canon of the movie, that character's first name is apparently Idris.
Idris Janek, tight. That's a good name. I also liked it. Well, I didn't like it. They did give him, he was the one who got to do the exposition dump on Shaw to catch the audience up of, he's like, they made us and we did something to them and now they want to kill us and this whole situation's fucked, you know, like he's the one who delivers that message because we just didn't get it, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. I think overall his character probably deserved more. Like he was one of my favorites in the movie. He got the heroic moment at the end. He got to take out the last engineer, or got to take out the ship. He didn't actually get the guy. Those must have some like those ribbed seatbelts must be like top of the line, right?
Yeah, they're real good. They're high quality shit.
R.I.P. Janek.
I like, again, going through my notes, I don't really think I have anything else. A lot of the notes that I didn't mention were just like dumb jokes. Like when Holloway gets killed by Vickers, my note says tired, stabbed, wired, burned alive. Or like earlier on, I had written R.I.P. Fifield. And then later on, when he wakes back up as a monster and attacks them, I wrote, wait, R.I.P. Fifield. And then there's a line break, and then I wrote, actually, scratch that, R.I.P. Fifield once again, sigh.
Man, he had it rough in there.
Yeah, I actually wrote it down. It says, I wrote here, lit on fire and shot multiple times and run over with an APC twice. Pretty brutal way to kill a crazed monster guy. Yeah. Cannot stress enough how much I love weird gore in movies. But like I said, I'm going through my notes here. I'm trying to think of everything else. Like, I don't think I really have anything else that like matters enough to mention during the episode.
All right. Well, maybe it's time we wrap up this expedition.
Ooh.
Final thoughts. I was pretty hard on this movie. I think it's an okay movie. I think it's a bad Alien movie. I think if they had separated it more from the Alien stuff, if they had a little less of that alien DNA, but was still set in the world as a separate story, I think I would have accepted it more into the Alien film canon. If it had been a standalone movie, I probably would have enjoyed it. Like if it had no connections at all, I probably would have enjoyed this story, you know, like I do other similar science fiction films like Sunshine, which I mentioned earlier. But at the end of the day, it's the movie we got, and they connected it to Alien in the ways that they did. And so it's a part of the series. I think it's personally skippable for like a normal person, not for someone like me who can't just jump around in a series, has to watch everything in order.
I'm the same.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think I'm fine with it existing the way it does, but it is certainly not my favorite of the franchise.
I'll basically echo pretty much the same sentiments. Like, it's ultimately, unlike you, I'm going to do my, determination review first. Ultimately, I think it's probably fine as well. It's like you said earlier, it's kind of in this weird gray area where it's too much like an Alien movie while simultaneously not being enough like an Alien movie.
Yes.
And it's just, like I said, it exists in kind of this weird gray area where it's like you're not really sure what to make of it, and like the movie isn't quite sure what it's trying to do. It has all these like big lofty themes, and it's like, the main character is explicitly religious, and she meets like the aliens that like literally created humanity, and she's still religious through all this, but it's like it's just a character trait that never goes anywhere or gets developed or ultimately really matters. It's just another thing on the checklist to remember about the character.
She does do a classic moving of the goalposts when I think Holloway points out to her, he's like, well, now David, one of them says like, you still believe even after you know who created you. And she's like, yeah, but who created them, huh? Right?
Yeah, that's some bullshit. Like, come on. I mean, that's not answering the question. That's dodging.
That's yeah.
But like
moving the goalposts.
The movie ultimately had a lot of small moments. Some of them were a little bigger moments, but the movie had a lot of individual parts that I liked. I'm not sure that it fully necessarily pulled together into a fully like cohesive whole. But like, it's really not bad. It's enjoyable. There's, some good performances. There's some good effects. There's some good action scenes. The monsters are generally creepy for the most part.
Yeah.
Like I hinted at, or like I mentioned, rather, I should say earlier, the engineers, I like the design. Like, if they're not going to go with the space jockey design as what that monster looks like, I like the fact that, like, if they decided it was going to look like an alien or look like a human, I like how they made it in that uncanny valley of very obviously humanoid, but equally obviously not actually human.
Right.
Like they find, like, if that's what they were going to do, they treaded that fine line very well and made a monster that did look humanoid, but obviously not human. I thought that was a cool choice.
Yes.
Like, if that's what they were going to do, like if that's the decision they had decided to make, they made the monster design suit that idea well.
Yes.
Although ultimately at the end of the day, I think it would have been cooler if the aliens didn't look human at all.
Didn't look human at all. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, ultimately, like you said, this is what we got. This is the movie they made, whether we necessarily like it or not. And then at the end of the day, I think I do kind of like it. It probably is skippable, like you said, mainly because there isn't even a fucking xenomorph in it.
Yeah.
So if you're watching it because of the xenomorphs, you literally won't get that in this.
Right.
So you'd only really need to watch it like as a preview for when you watch Covenant. Like, the movie, from an Alien franchise perspective, it's narratively relevant, but it's probably not something you really need to spend your time watching unless you're like, I'm going to watch all of the Alien movies, which coincidentally is exactly what we did.
Exactly. And
so here we are.
And I think now that we've talked through it, I do think that starting here probably was the right choice, because the makers want the story to start here. Until they make something that starts before it, they want the story to start here. For whatever reason, that's not up to us, unfortunately.
I play a lot of video games, and at some point in the franchise, the series always does a prequel. There's Metal Gear Solid 3, there's Devil May Cry 3, there's Yakuza 0. They always go out of their way to go back to before the first one.
Right.
And reverse engineer a story that will reasonably lead to the events we've already seen in the first one.
Sure.
And
Arkham Origins.
Arkham Origins, which I'm literally playing through right now, so I cannot believe that's not a game I thought of on my list. So and my point in bringing that up is that like this movie tried to do that, and I honestly am not even sure if it succeeded, because like it did put some seeds in, it did set some groundwork that you can see how it would theoretically expand into what Alien became.
Yeah.
But all of that way that you could see how it could reasonably connect is all just personal conjecture. Like the stuff actually presented in the movie, there isn't enough stuff there in actually Prometheus itself to, only based on the information present in the movie, reasonably arc into Alien. Like
Right.
the only way you'd be able to connect them is by inventing connections in your head that may not necessarily be there in the movie itself. You know?
Which I have done a lot of. I don't know. I am definitely trying to reckon with Prometheus and Covenant being a part of this franchise. It's been a lot of work, honestly.
And it's going to require more work as time goes on, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think this is a good place to leave it. I think next time, maybe we should dive into the Prometheus short films that were sort of made as promotional material, and also the deleted scenes. Maybe it'll give us a little bit more context about what they were going for. Maybe we'll find some more connections that might make me feel better about all of this, or might just make Prometheus a stronger movie on its own with a little bit more information about what was going on.
As I mentioned earlier, I did watch Prometheus on Prime last night, but get this, I also own it on Blu-ray.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't want to get up and
looking at it now. This Blu-ray has deleted and alternate scenes, including an alternate beginning and ending. So yes, I do have access to those deleted scenes and am able to watch them to talk about them.
All right, let's set that up for next time. Until then, Science Officer Kenny, where can people find you?
I forgot what your title was already.
Yeah, I did too. We're not going to worry about it. We'll make up something.
Okay. Fine by me.
I'll be Ensign Neal, whatever that means. I think
that'll work for me.
That's like a Star Trek thing, though, right? I was security officer.
Security grunt.
Security
That's what
grunt.
It was.
There. Okay. So where can people find you, Science Officer Kenny?
I am on Twitter at CYHOBBEZ. It is a fake word I invented. I have been using it as my online handle for nigh on 20 years now. And I'm not on every social media service, but all of the ones that I am on, I use that handle on. I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram, unlike you. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You can even find me on like the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live. And I have a Twitch account, but I've never streamed, and don't follow me because I won't stream. I only have a Twitch account to watch my friends that stream. I will never do it. So don't follow me on Twitch.
Okay.
But that's also where I am on there. What about you?
Well, can I follow you on Twitch?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitch. Don't worry.
Cool. Just me. Nobody else.
Correct. Only Neal.
You can find me on Twitter at Final Neal, or follow my retro gaming Instagram account at Final Neal Retro. I do another podcast all about the Mortal Kombat franchise, specifically Mortal Kombat movies, TV shows, books, and comic books. That's still going on. It's not going to be going on forever, though. You can find that show at mkpodquest.com, or search in your podcast app, MK Podquest.
I listen to it. It's good. You should listen to it too, listeners.
Oh, shucks. Thank you. It's similar to this, but about Mortal Kombat stuff. So not as many existential questions to be tackled.
No engineers in that one.
You can follow this show on Twitter at Crew Expendapod. All one word, Crew Expendapod. And make sure you subscribe to the show in your podcast app. We're up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual places. Rate and review us. Give us good 5-star reviews.
And tell everyone you know.
Tell everybody you know. Tell all your alien friends that we're out here talking shit about Prometheus. And tell them to come at me.
Tell all the engineers you know and see if it'll rile them up what we said about it.
Also, I'm just going to, just to be clear, just in case, I'm on the engineer's side, okay? I, for one, welcome our engineer overlords.
There you go. I, for one, I'm staying Switzerland in this one.
Okay, you're just going to see how things shake out.
Correct. And then back the winner. That's how you know you're good.
Yeah. All right. Science Officer Kenny, I think it's time for us to get out of here. So everybody out there, stay
frosty.